You are listening to the War on the Rocks podcast on strategy, defense, and foreign affairs. My name's Ryan Evans. I'm the founder of War on the Rocks. In this episode, I sat down with Vice Admiral Peter Garvin, who leads the National Defense University, a truly special institution. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Why did you join the Navy?
So I was a high school athlete, not really knowing where I was going to go to school, not really that focused on what was next. My cross the street diagonally neighbor, who was a blue and gold officer for the United States Naval Academy, saw something in me that honestly I didn't see in myself and asked me where I was going to go to college, and I wasn't really sure. I was looking at schools that perhaps I could play for, and I really hadn't put a whole lot of thought into it beyond that. And so he kind of helped me and focused me and said, what do you think about this? And I said, well, there's a bunch of things there that sound really interesting, always interested in flying and aerospace. And they're like, well, you can do that. So went to the Naval Academy, lucky enough to get in there. Initially struggled a bit, if I'm being candid, but got through it, got through flight school, and had not intended to stay in the Navy this long. But turns out I really love the people, and I really love the mission, and can't imagine having done anything else.
What aircraft did you end up in?
So I ended up in P-3 Orions. And again, that tells you a little bit of how old I am because they're long gone. We now fly the P-8 Poseidon. They have multiple missions, but the focus, the primary mission of both aircraft is anti-submarine warfare. It is the United States Navy's, in fact, it's the United States Department of Defense's only long-range anti-submarine warfare aircraft and capability. And the P-3 was great. The P-8's even greater.
Did you ever get to fly the P-8?
I did. All the automation, to be frank, was rather interesting. So I turned off all the autopilots, moved the HUD out of the way so I could see. Went a little old school on them.
At what point in your career did you stop flying and start taking on other organizational leadership tasks?
So it's a little bit sneaky how they do this to you. So they still let me fly just every couple of months here and there, and sort of kind of got to beg, steal, or borrow. So the last aircraft I got to fly was down in Corpus Christi, the T-54, which is the new multi-engine trainer. But flying as a job, the last time is when you're squadron CO. When you're a wing commander, you get to fly with each of the squadrons, but you're not really out there doing the mission per se. So squadron command, which ended for me in 2008.
What was the most memorable deployment you had while you were still in the cockpit?
Yeah, it has to be the final deployment as a Squadron XO and CO to the desert. So we were split based 3 ways. We were down in Al Udeid, Qatar, and then we had a small contingent up in Iraq, Nasiriyah, so Camp Adder, Tallil Air Base goes by all 3 of those names. And then we had a couple of planes out in Japan, of all places, performing some missions out there. And during that time, my CO at the time, when I was the XO, was an NFO, a naval flight officer. So he's a backseater. And he was concerned about our folks flying combat arrivals and departures into and out of the base in Iraq. And he asked me if I would mind spending the majority of the deployment in Iraq. And I sort of had to catch myself and say, you want me to spend the deployment flying and not doing all the XO things? Happy to comply. So it was a great deployment, brought all the folks in the planes back. So that's a good one.
What submarines were in the deserts of Iraq?
Turns out there are none in the deserts of Iraq.
Not that you found anyway.
No, we didn't. But turns out the sensors that we have on board that aircraft that are really good at finding things at sea are also really good at finding things in sand.
Who was your favorite boss in the Navy who was not a flag officer?
Tough to say. I mean, I have truly been blessed with a lot of great bosses. But recognizing one in particular, when I was a department head, his name was Pat Buckley. And I will tell you, he really formed me into what I thought I could be, a skipper. At that point, I was like, I'm just flying. I'm an 04. Who knows where it's going to lead? But he saw something in me and he kind of pushed me along. And I credit him with my success, among many others, to be perfectly candid.
Tell me a bit about the cultural differences between sort of, I guess, picking a couple of the main tribes in the Navy, surface warfare officers and aviators.
So, little known fact, I spent some time on amphibious warship as the navigator. So I have a SWO appreciation tour under my belt. And I loved doing it. When you come up for major command, there's a fork in the road there. And I could have gone off and commanded amphibious assault ships and done that and sort of been a professional surface warfare officer. So I won't denigrate the surface warfare officers. I will make fun of them just like they make fun of us. And then the submariners are a unique breed. They'll tell you that too. Incredibly intelligent folks, sometimes a little lacking in the sense of humor, but a lot of them do have a sense of humor.
Maybe they just didn't think your jokes were funny.
Could be that. So there you go. So it's like being in a family with a lot of siblings, right? And, we can pick on each other, but nobody else can pick on us.
Yeah. So before you were here, you were running the Naval War College. How did you get selected for that leadership opportunity?
I did not go to the Naval War College. I went to the National Defense University, the National War College down here in D.C. So when the secretary and the CNO asked me about the opportunity to go up to Newport, I reminded them that I didn't go there. And they're like, no, that's okay. We want you to bring leadership and new ideas and the like to the schoolhouse, and we think you're the right candidate. And so I was honored and humbled by the opportunity. And Newport is an amazing place. That school is just absolutely fantastic. I do have a thought about Navy assignment processes. Turns out the more you like a job, the less time they let you do the job. And I was only in Newport for 13 months. So it was a fantastic tour.
I think the Naval War College is a fascinating place. We've talked about this privately before because I think there's more non-naval officers there than naval officers. Is that correct?
If you include all the foreign students and the like, that's true. For a time, there was a point at which the Army was sending quite a few officers to Newport. And I can understand that. Newport versus Leavenworth or Carlisle, it seems like it'd be a better place to live. But now the Navy is the majority, very slight majority of the United States military officers that are assigned there.
And there's a problem there. Well, it might not be a problem depending on how you look at it, but for a lot of reasons. One, I think the two main reasons, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, because the Navy is undermanned for what it needs to do. And two, because there is sort of a cultural aversion, I think, to the value of advanced education for high-flying officers. That the Navy often doesn't send folks there as much as the other services do to their senior war colleges.
You bring up an interesting point, and it does point to cultural differences. And it's not always necessarily directly about the appreciation of higher education. It's the timing of and where it fits in talent management. And so depending on which of the tribes we talked about earlier, you'll find some that have multiple master's degrees, and you'll find others like myself who only have the one, and I had to squeeze it in between non-flying tours. So I don't necessarily think it's an underappreciation, but it is definitely an inherent tension in the talent management aspect of it. And you alluded to the cause of that, which of course, we need to fill cockpits at sea, we need to fill ship billets at sea and submarines at sea in order to be ready to fight and win. We know about this tension, and we constantly try to sort of break out of that. And that's why you see that most of the flag officers that you see today have some form of graduate education and sometimes multiple forms.
What is the biggest thing you and your team there got done during your 13 months at the Naval War College?
We got a lot done. And again, no credit to me, all credit to the team. But one of the things that we did was instituting a new class called the Perspectives on Modern Warfare. And everybody takes it. And the idea behind that class is that it amplifies and utilizes the guest speakers we're able to get there. And what we really focused on were things that like disruptive technology, the very latest in the changing character of war, the perspectives of those that have just come back from a combatant command or you name your latest conflict, so that we're learning instantaneously the value of what's going on in the world. An example of that is bringing back somebody who had great experience in the Black Sea, I think the Ukraine fight and the like. So probably that class, Perspectives on Modern Warfare, and it's still going.
Who teaches that?
That was one of the things I was really happy about, was that we had more volunteer faculty than we had spots to teach. So we co-taught it. So we had 2 professors in the classroom, and I had even volunteered myself to teach and signed my successor up. Now he's teaching it as well. So the idea is that it's rotational and folks get a chance to get in there because it helps keep them fresh too.
2 of my, I would say, top 10 favorite thinkers on war are up at the Naval War College. One who I've known for many years, Tim Hoyt, and 2, Sally Payne, who I know less well. I've only met her once, but have read her books, and I just think she's fantastic.
They both are. And those are 2 of the legends, but there are many there.
So how did you get selected to run the National Defense University?
Again, a bit of serendipity, and I was not thinking this was in the future. But when I was presented with the opportunity, I said, absolutely. It's in some sense coming home. I graduated from National in 2005, so 20 years ago. And it is really interesting to see what has changed and what hasn't changed over the course of the 20 years. But one of the things that's absolutely consistent between the Naval War College, the NDU of 20 years ago, and the NDU of today is the energy, drive, and passion that the faculty bring to the mission set.
You had some big shoes to fill. I'm a big General Plane fan. How did that handover go?
Oh, it was fantastic. And again, I give massive credit to General Plane. Still in contact with him when I need to phone a friend and the like. He's enjoying life in Florida right now. So sometimes when I call him, I think I'm giving him a break from the tasks at hand. That handover went great. You don't want to talk about a humble servant leader, someone incredibly well-read, somebody focused on the mission, is all about the school, is all about the students. So it was a natural affinity from the outset. And I give him great credit through some pretty austere times, ensuring that we were focused on the resources on the right thing, which is making sure that we have the very best faculty in order to achieve the mission set. So it was a great turnover.
And I just thought about this, but 2 aviators as well.
That's right.
From different services. So you just touched on, I think, one of the important themes that I want to discuss. Professional military education is often under scrutiny by senior policymakers. I think everything in the Defense Department is under renewed scrutiny under the Trump administration. I don't say that in a judgmental way or good way or a bad way, but one of those things is professional military education. And at the same time, and for my listeners, I'm just going to start using the acronym PME. It's often more is always demanded of it without more funding necessarily, which is a challenge. It's a leadership challenge. It's a faculty challenge. It's an administrative challenge. And so how do you think about these issues more broadly? Because you dealt with this at the Naval War College as well under the last administration.
I actually welcome and appreciate the attention that we receive because that goes directly to relevance. If we weren't relevant, if we weren't appreciated, we wouldn't have anything on the comms, right? So it would be silly to think that we don't enjoy the oversight. The oversight's good. What it does do in terms of constrained resources and the rapid change in the character of warfare, it forces us to be really agile in our thinking and what's really important to get in the classroom, because you can't just keep adding and adding and adding, the accretion of risk of what that entails. So if you just try to do everything, you're not going to be great at anything. So what that forces is a constant evaluation of the curriculum and all the courses that we offer, whether it's the electives or the mainline courses. And we very much appreciate the opportunity to do that. I would say in some ways that's one of the unique things about professional military education writ large is our ability to adapt quickly to ensure that we're meeting the need. Again, one of the things I've been known to say, in fact, I think the team is tired of hearing me say it, is we don't do education for the sake of education. And I'm not denigrating generalized education. It got us to where we are, make sure we understand what our future might hold. So generalized education is a very good thing. But we are professional education. It's education in order to fight and win. It's education in order to ensure our national security. So it's a very, very clear point. That also serves as a catalyst to make sure that we're using the resources we have, however constrained they might be, to the greatest effect to ensure that these young men and women that we're educating are prepared to go out and fight and win.
And just to walk through briefly the major components of National Defense University, you got the National War College, of course, the Eisenhower School, which is on the Defense Industrial Base, Joint Forces Staff College, College of Information and Cyberspace, and the College of International Security Affairs. And there's other smaller components as well that I know I'm missing. So you got a lot going on here.
That's right. In addition to the 5 colleges you just mentioned, we also have a fantastic research arm in our Institute for National Strategic Studies. And then they have several subordinate centers within those. And again, that's an area in which we are very agile. We just stood up this year the Center for the Study of Disruptive Technology and Future Warfare, led by Dr. James Giordano. Again, trying to make sure we're keeping up and in some cases leading the research effort and to ensure that we are ready for the next war, whatever that might bring.
We are going to take a quick break to talk about breaks in the episodes. We're going to start doing advertising more often, and we approach advertising differently than most podcasts. We're not just going to put standard ad copy. What we're going to do in the middle of these episodes is sort of insert a mini episode, a very tightly edited 2-minute conversation with an executive or founder of an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, having some sort of thoughtful conversation about what it is they do and how it ties into national security. If you'd like to learn more about advertising with War on the Rocks, which will include a pre-roll of about 30 seconds, and then one of these mid-rolls that includes a longer, tightly edited conversation in the middle of one of our episodes, which is listened to, by the way, by up to 100,000 people, contact us at War on the Rocks. And you could do that by simply emailing editor@warontherocks.com and make some reference to advertising on our podcast in the subject line. Again, that's editor, EDITOR, @warontherocks.com. And now back to my conversation with Vice Admiral Peter Garvin. So what sets National Defense University, of course, from comparable institutions? I mean, in a way, there are no comparable institutions because it's inherently joint. So what does that mean in terms of what you're trying to do to prepare not just military officers, but civil servants and others, and how it works differently here than it might at, I know it's bigger than just a war college. It's much bigger than that, but then it works at the service war colleges.
That's an excellent question, and it goes to what I've been known to say is our unique value proposition. What do we bring that no others do, or that no others do in quite the same way? And when I think of it in terms of the National Defense University and the service schools, this is not shooting on their target, because I think they also bring a unique value proposition to a professional military education is through their domain lens. So if you think Navy, it's maritime power. If you think Army, it's land power, air power, et cetera. That lens, but looking at very similar, if not the same, vexing national security issues. Here at the National Defense University, we look at it from an all elements of national power strategic view, not lost on anyone. We're here located in D.C., the seat of all of those interagency powers, if you will. So it brings that element to it. And each of the 5 constituent parts of the National Defense University also bring a little bit of uniqueness to them. Again, if you think National War College, it's strategy, policy, it's recommendations, it's thinking it through in the classic ends, ways, means way of looking at things. If you look at the Eisenhower School, really focused on industry, acquisition, logistics, supply, you name it over there. And then at the College of Information and Cyberspace, really looking at not just the cyber, but definitely the cyber, but also the information space, which I think is often underplayed and underappreciated. So looking at it through that lens. And if you look at the College of International Security Affairs, that's all the gray zone left of bang. And hopefully if everything goes right in that world, we don't get to full-scale kinetics. So if you think about it from a gray zone, left of kinetics kind of perspective, the College of International Security Affairs does a great job there with a lot of foreign partners in that school as well. And then if you look at the Joint Forces Staff College down in Norfolk, it's not lost and shouldn't be lost on any of your listeners that 74% of the Joint Professional Military Education Phase 2, which is the one that kind of gets you in the race as a major commander, is taught there. So we all have kind of a unique perspective to add to the national security issues as they present. And again, to my mind, it's an effectiveness argument, not an efficiency argument. The effectiveness being, national security is not really negotiable to my mind. So we have to be as effective as we possibly can while being good stewards of our resources.
One of the cool things also that I think you do here is Capstone. Could you talk about that?
So Capstone and Keystone and Pinnacle, all part of the same program. Capstone is the course that is actually mandated by law for all Rising 07s. And all Rising 07s, but what I mean by that is soon to be 1-star admirals or 1-star generals in all the services. And the State Department also and others that have new senior executive service people, they contribute as well to that course. And we run it 4 times a year. It's a fantastic course, about 5 weeks long. And it serves, as it says in the law, it serves as the foundational course for rising general and flag officers. The idea is that you're not teaching them everything. You're teaching them a broad spectrum of things so that they can realize and understand where they're strong and where they're weak and maybe seek education in those areas that they need to fill out their portfolio so that they can be effective joint and combined leaders. We also enjoy several of our partners in that. So a lot of Five Eye, so think UK, Australia, New Zealand, and others in that course as well.
What you mentioned when we were talking about the Naval War College course that you and your team created, the guest speakers. For these courses, Capstone, Pinnacle, and Keystone, you also get some amazing guest speakers.
We do. And a little known fact is that Capstone, Keystone, and Pinnacle, Capstone being the 1-star course, Pinnacle being the 3-star course, Keystone is the senior enlisted course where the rising E9s or very senior enlisted folks are coming in. Little known fact about that program is there's no standing faculty. The entire course is taught by folks that we bring in, which allows us to be incredibly agile, and also folks that they go out and see while they're on the road. So we have them go visit combatant commands and the like so that they get immersion in the actual events of the day.
Just to go back to INSS, and my intro to that years ago was when Frank Hoffman and TX Hammis used to invite me here for coffee right before I started War on the Rocks. They do incredible research for DoD and the Joint Staff, so it's like this internal think tank.
It is. And that's another good point, which is that it's not blue sky research, although they do obviously thinking outside of the directed research, but is very much the research arm, very responsive directly to the Joint Staff and the Department of Defense and others that contribute to that. So it's fantastic research. It's run by Dr. Denise Natali, and she has a group of scholars and researchers there that are just fantastic. And I would add on that we use the researchers in the classroom and we get standard faculty into the research arm too. So it's a way of developing our faculty.
I realize that some of this will come from policy guidance, but what are the ways in which you think this institution needs to change? And in what ways do you want to see it change?
So again, it's that constant striving to up our game. I'm often happy, but I'm never content. We've always got to think about how we can better serve our students in order to fight and win. And I would tell you, we need to look at modalities of teaching. We need to look at what the pedagogy is. We need to make sure that we're taking advantage of the latest technology. And one of the things we'll talk about perhaps is the advent of artificial intelligence in the classroom. And so kind of what we're doing there is not just teaching about artificial intelligence. We need to be teaching with artificial intelligence. And that's an important turn of phrase there. So not just describing how artificial intelligence might impact national security, but actually inculcating it and bringing it into the classroom so that we are most effective in teaching.
This was in I think the latest or one of the latest executive orders from the president. It says, grow our senior military colleges into hubs of AI research, development, and talent building, teaching core AI skills and literacy to future generations. Foster AI-specific curriculum, including an AI use, development, and infrastructure management in the senior military colleges throughout majors. I think it's terrific guidance, but the devil's in the details. Implementation is going to be the key to this.
I agree. And that comes from Winning the Race, America's AI Action Plan, just released this month. So I saw that as a fantastic hook for things that we are already doing, but also things we want to do, right? So going from teaching about it to teaching with it, and also really including our industry partners, because they can also see themselves in that. So that comes from Pillar 1. But if you look at Pillar 2 and 3, there are also places where the National Defense University can add value. And again, the place I want to get to is where we're actually fully incorporating it. We have the full cyber labs that we need. We have the technology that we need to teach utilizing AI, recognizing the perils as well as the opportunities that exist with artificial intelligence. We're not Pollyanna, but we're also not trying to put the genie back in the bottle. Because again, our adversaries certainly are not. So how do we up our game in that arena? And I do think a large part of that comes from not just collaborating with some of our industry partners, but bringing them into the classroom, into the laboratory, into our research centers, so that we're all better as a nation.
Just process-wise, if you don't mind me getting into the weeds, how are you and your team, the heads of the colleges who are really important leaders, planning to execute on this? Like, what's the process look like?
So currently, we are exploring the opportunities with our corporate friends. For example, just on Monday, I had a nice dinner with about 20 of them to see where their interest lies and where their expertise lies. And honestly, I think some of the folks that were at that dinner were expecting a standard sales pitch and asking for money.
Were these AI companies or were these?
It was across industry. So there were a couple of AI folks in there. I won't name names because we stayed off the record. There were a couple logistics companies in there. So think contested logistics and defense industrial base kind of companies, as well as a few investment bankers and the like that have friends and interests. And I think I shocked them a little bit by saying, of course, interested in resourcing, but mostly interested in what's in your craniums, what's in your heads. You're successful because you are brilliant at your business. And I would like to glean from you that expertise so that we can get it into our classroom and into our students.
Yeah, as I've said in many other fora before, I mean, I totally agree, but we live in this era where all the most important enterprises in the world, from the armed services to Fortune 500 companies, share really fundamentally the same problems: critical technologies, logistics, and supply chain issues, the downstream effects or direct effects of wars and terrorist attacks. And learning from across the public-private sector divide in continuous ways, not just episodic ways, I think is critical.
And again, just to expand on that a little bit, if you think about the wars of the past, those largely, since World War II, have not been existential. But if you think about the wars of the future, they very well could be, and we need to prepare for that. And the time to develop those relationships when we talk about whole of government and whole of nation, whole of society, is not when you're in the fight. The time to generate those relationships so that you can quickly come up on step as a nation is now. So I feel a sense of urgency just generated by just look at the geopolitical environment we find ourselves in, that we need to be ready as a nation.
How often, if you can share this, how often do you talk to the chairman and what kind of guidance have you gotten from him?
Honestly, very early in General Kane's tenure, I think it was about the third time he was over here, he says, "I seem like I'm seeing you a lot, Pete." And I said, "Yes, sir, it's a very good thing." Because he is fully invested in this university, in what it produces. We are the chairman's university after all, and he spends a fair amount of his time, of which he has not a lot of discretionary time, mentoring the capstone students and the pinnacle students. And he is going to be our first presidential lecture series of this academic year, coming over on the 2nd of September. So I see him with some regularity. I had my 1v1 hour-long sit-down with him on the 17th of July, and it was a fantastic engagement. And he's fully invested in what the National Defense University brings to the current and future fight.
What is a book that has meant a lot to you at some point in your life or career? And it doesn't have to be national security related.
If you're talking about a personal book that I pick up with a fair degree of regularity, it's Reflections. So Marcus Aurelius, and looking at the philosophy of Stoicism. It's probably not going to be popular with your listeners, but that is the book.
I think it will be. A plurality of our listeners are current and former service members, and I know that Stoicism is very appealing to the profession of arms for obvious reasons. Why is it appealing to you?
It helps me reflect every single day, having to earn it every single day, having to recognize both the beauty of humanity as well as the tragic nature of humanity. I have a saying about humanity. Sometimes we're beautiful, sometimes we're tragic, sometimes it's the same person, same day, and sometimes that person is you. And so as a leader, you have to learn to give grace, and you also have to learn how to receive grace. You also have to make sure that you understand that you lead with a humble heart, and it is an honor and a responsibility to lead the people that we do. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's very powerful. I'm more of an Epicurean myself, but I can appreciate Stoicism. Any other books?
Well, so I'm a big Furling fan. So he just released The Shots Heard Around the World, which actually describes sort of the American Revolution as it was perceived from outside. It's a good book. He's written a couple of great books. And, well, that's one on the sort of the Revolutionary War perspective. I've read a couple of recent books and some older books on the advent of artificial intelligence. Co-Intelligence is, I think, one you and I talked about.
Yeah, great book.
That's a great book. But even going back a little further, there's The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman. That's a good book. And if you want to scare yourself, James Barat wrote a book, and I'll probably get the title wrong, but it's about mankind's final invention. Kind of the potential perils that AI may offer also. So I've studied up on that. I really drift around when it comes to books. If I find a particular subject interesting, I'll go find 5 books on it and try to read them and try to educate myself.
I just read this book, and I'm probably going to pronounce the title wrong. It was written in 1872 or published in 1872 by Samuel Butler. It's called Erewhon, and it's about this guy who's British and ends up in this faraway colony. It's not named as New Zealand, but that's basically the setting. And he ends up going into the unexplored interior and discovering this civilization that used to be much more advanced than Europe was at the time the novel was written, but had hundreds of years ago given away all their technology because they believed that machines would develop a consciousness and dominate humanity. And I believe this is the first person that sort of came up with that fear or that idea. And it was just remarkable.
You just added to my list of books I need to read. So that does serve as an interesting cautionary tale. In my view, when we look at the advent of artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum, all those sort of things, we have to think in terms of how does that augment humanity, not how does it replace humanity. When you think in terms of critical thinking, bringing AI into the classroom, it was interesting to watch the paroxysms, I call it, of the different universities and colleges around the country. Some just absolutely wanted to close the door on it, just bring pencil and paper and we'll do it the old school way. Others were openly adapting it, just cite it and tell us how you did it and those sort of things. I'm more on that side of the house because, again, as mentioned in a few of the cautionary tales, you can either be a part of it or be overtaken by technology.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of War on the Rocks. Don't forget to check out our membership program at warontherocks.com/membership. Price is going up soon, so now is the right time to lock in our annual rate. Stay safe and stay healthy.